Good evening, everybody out there in Facebook land. Paul Sterling here. I am a relationship and intimacy coach. And my co-leader tonight, we were both on a call with John Gray, the guy, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, this last weekend. And when I heard her talk, I was blown away by her connection to the divine feminine and masculine, and asked ARIELLE Brown to join me on this call. So maybe you could bounce in. How did you get to where you are now? Like, has this always been your path? What was that turning point event where you woke up one day and said, damn?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you say, how did I get to this place? Through a lot of discomfort and pleasure. But I remember, so when I kind of nutshell the experience of my life is I had a lot of really challenging and complex relationships with men, sexual, intimate relationships with men in my 20s. And I spent such a long time with the desire to find my one, my partner, that I would get into these really intense relationships with men that were often imbalanced and have this systematic experience of bypassing the truth that I felt in my body because of my own conditioning about wanting a partner, and to me, a collective conditioning for women to kind of bypass their own intuitive knowing to listen to the man or to listen to the masculine. It's a very interesting conditioning that we are working with here. And, I did a good job of getting myself out of the intensely imbalanced romantic relationships. And then I found myself in a relationship with a really beautiful man, like really kind and loving man who also struggled with mania and depression as well. And I remember that I was sitting in bed one day and he was in a more depressive space in the living room, sitting, on the computer. And I remember that I was in bed and thinking to myself, for the amount of sexual experiences that I've had in my life, and it's been a lot. I've had a lot of sexual experiences, especially in college. And for the amount of sexual experiences that I've had, the amount of truly fulfilling sexual experiences where I feel connected to my pleasure, where I feel able to communicate and open to receiving pleasure is actually very small.
So wait, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Just all I want to do is I want to reel you back just a tiny bit. Like, how many women do you think have that same thing that, because there were several things you said. One is about having sex but not intimacy, and the other one is even though there was a lot of sex, there wasn't a lot of pleasure. And I'm wondering how big an epidemic you think that actually is.
I think it's a huge epidemic. I mean, when we see the type of sex that's presented to us in culture and on billboards and in porn, we see sex that's very focused on the pleasuring of the male. And it's focused on a very kind of hard, fast, intense, quick pleasure, which is not the feminine experience of orgasm. The feminine takes, like, women can take 20, 30 minutes for our body to feel fully wet and open and like receptive and safe in our
Well,
body.
yeah, and I used to teach tantra and sacred sexuality, and I was checking up on the internet at one point to the typical male orgasm is like 5 minutes long. I mean, not 5 minutes long, takes up 5 minutes to get to orgasm. 5 minutes long, that'd be a good thing.
Yeah.
And like you said, the typical woman is 25 minutes. So there's this huge gap between the two. And the way I look at it is, and tonight, just so that people know, we're going to talk about the divine masculine feminine communication, intimacy, and sex. We landed on sex, but we're going to bounce all three of those. And we're going to get back to ARIELLE in a second, but it's like, if you look at it, it has to change. So I'm going to ask you a leading question, and I want everybody, out there in Facebook land to answer too. Have you ever had a pet? Have you ever had a dog?
Yeah.
The dogs like bones.
Most of them, I would think. Yeah.
Actually, here's the thing that I've found from having dogs. Dogs settle for bones, but they want steak. If you offered steak and bones, and how this ties into this whole thing is so many people have settled for bones in their relationships, in the bedroom, in the communication, in the intimacy that they have. And what we want to do is help people understand. And I know there's so many vegetarians, and so steak might not be the right metaphor, but just turn the metaphor the way you want. So
Yeah.
what, I kind of interrupted your turning point. Tell me more.
Yeah. So, I remember sitting in bed and really feeling this deep desire to know what pleasure and experience is available through my sex. And, as much of that, as much as it might have felt nice to just blame the issue on all of my partners, I just got to this place of realizing that, I'm the common denominator in this equation. And there's something in me that is attracting these types of experiences and these types of partners into my life. And I am helping to co-create this. So I want to figure out what it is that's going on within me, within my heart, within my body, within my mind that is creating this experience over and over again so I can be a choice around creating something new. And that's really what opened me to my own path of sexuality and embodiment and really spirituality.
So let me get an idea, because I'm sort of the embodiment of masculinity with, I got a strong feminine side too, but how, and I almost need numbers or something like, what was your sex life on a scale of 1 to 10 before you transformed? Was it a 3 and a 4 and now it's at an 8? I want people to see that there's a whole nother world, another realm out there.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I would say before I really awoke into my sexuality, the number of people who I was having sex with was significantly higher. Like most of my sex, in terms of the numbers of people that I had sex with.
Wait, no, it wasn't the number of people. It was the quality of the experience.
Totally. Totally, but I actually think it's important to
okay. Go for
it. That as I deepened more and more into my body and into my sexuality, what it means to share that type of an experience with someone and the selectivity of who I choose to engage in that space with because of what it means on an energetic level, on a spiritual level. So the quantity of people I was sleeping with decreased significantly, but the quality of my ability to stay present in my body and let go of the idea that only when I'm in climax am I doing it right, but that there's actually a way to find richness and like sensation and connection in any point in a sexual experience. And that through bringing my full presence and attention to that space, it's like a wellspring can open up that you didn't even know was there.
Right. And one of the ways of looking at intimacy, lovemaking, sex, and sexuality is that, one of the things we both teach is about communication and compassion and communication. And lovemaking is a form of communication. How we touch each other is like, what do I want to convey with my touch, with my sounds, with my movement? Like, how am I communicating with my partner? And by the way, this is interactive for all you out there in Facebook land. If you get an aha, please type in the comments, type in where you're watching from, because we get people from basically around the world. And we love it when you interact with us and let us know. So it's not just this one-way conversation, but it's inclusive.
Yeah.
So and I also want to speak for a lot of the men that, as you described it, that they weren't as great a lovers as you would have wanted. I'm guilty as charged. I like my skills in the world of lovemaking. Oh my God, were so, I didn't know better. I really didn't. And my first experience was so embarrassing that I almost spent, I think, the next 20 years trying to make up for that.
Mm.
And the problem is there's so much shame, especially among men, because we're supposed to know that you don't just go, you know, what do you do in the locker room? You go and brag.
Yeah.
You do not say, you know what? I climaxed a lot earlier than I wanted to. I was embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I'd like to know, how do I control when I ejaculate or don't? And how do I actually make love so that I'm not in my head, but I'm in my heart? And it took discovering Tantra and compassionate communication. It took a lot to actually wake that up and discover that it was a skill that could be learned, not a gene that you're either born with or not born with.
Yeah, and it's such an important conversation. It makes me think of one of my earlier teachers, Nicole Daydon, who's the founder of a practice called orgasmic meditation. And we were sitting, you know, she was teaching and talking about how we've gotten to a place in culture where men are carrying the sexual load for men and women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been such a wounding for women around sexuality, and understandably, because there have been so many experiences of violation of women, you know, penetration of women without attunement. It's a very potentially traumatic thing. That what winds up happening for so many women is that there's a way that we kind of opt out of the body and opt out of our sovereignty in our sexuality, which, you know, men actually need us to guide them. And that doesn't mean that we're, you know, in our masculine, like do this and then this and then this. But there's a way that we as women can be embodied in our sexual experiences in such a way where the way we embody leads and teaches through how we respond. And that's not the way that I see a lot of sex playing out, and it's hurting both sexes when it comes to male-female sex.
Well, I'll speak for me, but I'm speaking for men too. But men, as much as we can seem rough and tumble and like cocky and arrogant and all the rest of it, also there's a very gentle side. And when it comes to sex and sexuality, being terrified, not knowing. And so learning how to get criticism and critique without it sounding like a no, don't do that, don't touch that, don't touch that. Pretty soon we're like, oh my God, I'll just go watch TV.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how do you set yourself, how do you set yourself and your partner up to win? And part of this, so I want to expand the conversation because we're talking about in the bedroom, but also in life. How do you set that up, and how do you ask for what you want? And there's still this dance with the wow, the masculine wanting to be the hero and the feminine in this dance between roles and rules and responsibilities that's all changing. It's like there's this huge transformation happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your take on all that?
Oh, well, when you were first, you know, talking about the communication piece and how do we set up our partners for success, I wasn't necessarily thinking about it from a masculine feminine perspective, but I'd love to go there in a moment. But what was coming up for me as you were speaking, how do we set our partners up for success when we're speaking, when we're directing? So to me, when we're the feminine within us is the one that feels the truth in the moment. So when I have this desire that's emerging, I'm discerning in myself, how do I feel? Like, what is it that I actually want? What is it that I actually need? And then to me, our internal masculine is the one that penetrates, that it takes that truth, brings it up through the body and penetrates it into our relationships. It expresses it into our intimate relationships, into all of our relationships. And the key here, before we even express, make a request or make an adjustment into our relationships, is to me the alchemy of having approval for how we feel about what we want and what we need. Do you feel what I'm saying here?
So can you give me, because when I'm coaching couples, I tell them, especially the feminine, if you guide them in advance of what you want, like, I like it when you touch me this way, rather than waiting until he touches you a way that you don't want, and then you're going, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And see, the problem with that, or not the problem, but the challenge is learning to own your sensuality, own your, being able to say out loud what I want. You know, and being able to use our voice. And we're taught, no, don't talk about sex, religion, politics. And, you know, I like it when you stroke me like that. It makes me wet. It's like, you know, whatever it is, it turns me on. So could we do that for a little while? You know, and so setting the guy up to win.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, to me as a woman, it's the first step is having approval for the fact that I have a desire.
Mm.
And to me, this isn't just a female thing. This is a human thing. Like, there is an immense stigma around being honest about how we feel and what we want. Like the fear of being too much, the fear of being rejected, the awareness of this might make the person across from me feel shame, because that's something that I know a lot of women that I talk to are walking on eggshells around, because there's so much, you know, desire to perform for men and the desire to show up in service to the feminine. So there's a way that if I want to make a request of you, you know, say we're having a communication and there's something that I'm wanting from you that feels, you know, vulnerable. Like, to me, it begins with really finding my rightness with that desire. And the fact that this desire exists in me means that there's actually an opportunity for more intimacy and more clarity and connection between you and I. And communicating it from that place of like, hey, I would so love to experience this in this way. It feels so good when you do this. And I would love to receive this from you. I'm curious if you're open to that.
See, and what happens for me when I hear that, God, I don't know what I'm choking on here, but when I hear that, I get excited because I know how to win here. And I know that that's not, it's not like a battle of the sexes. I'm not winning over you, but I'm winning with you. If you like, here's what I like.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing. And sometimes it's like, if you're just learning, it might be important to have a learning time. Go, okay, here's 20 minutes. I'm just going to introduce you to my body. We're not aimed for sex. This is really an educational tour. Here's my whatever, my breast, my yoni, my whatever. And here's how these like to be touched, at least today. Tomorrow it might be different, but, you know, and here's how, and you can go back and forth and just do that. And another thing, that an exercise that's extremely fun, and it stretches your comfort zone. All of the things well, not all of them, but a lot of them that we're going to talk about today are getting outside your comfort zone. So you're starting to expand your ability to feel pleasure and to communicate tough stuff. An exercise, you set a timer and go, for the next 10 minutes, it's your time. Whatever you want, you know, as long, like within whatever reason is, you tell me what you want, whether it's nibbling on your toes or anything, and it's your 10 minutes, and it's totally focused on you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that game. And to me, one of the most powerful things about playing that game, especially if you're if you're someone who has, you know, fear about things going too far, or if you like identify as someone where it's hard for you to fully relax into an experience because you're afraid that if you open up to your yes somewhere, you'll just have to be a yes everywhere. And I know that's a thing that, you know, when I speak women, there's the fear, the vigilance of, if I don't keep my vigilance up, something's going to happen that I don't want it to happen. So when you're working with that theme, I feel like a really powerful piece there is getting really clear on, what are my boundaries in this game? What is my yes up until the place where I am a no? And communicating, this is like, these are my clear boundaries. And once both people are clear, you're able to relax in a way that if you didn't speak it, it would probably be a very different circumstance.
And how to say, and see, the thing that the dance with what you were saying with the yes on the other side is how to say no with compassion, because a lot of people are afraid that no is going to break the connection. So I can't say no. So it's like, how do you say no and still keep the heart open on both? You know, it's not like you did something wrong. You know, like, I'm not ready to be entered right now. And can we do this for a little while? Can we do something else? And most men are not taught to ask permission. And I learned this in an interesting way. I learned it through the Tantra teaching, but I was single for a while, and I went out on a date, and then at the end of the date, there was the do you kiss or don't you kiss? And, you know, I was like a big adult, and I didn't know. And I was uncomfortable and I had a 40-minute drive home, and the whole drive home I'm going, should I, shouldn't I? And at some point in that drive, I woke up and I realized, oh my God, I'm an adult. I can ask. And from then on, it was like, not every kiss, but if it was somebody that I hadn't kissed before, especially, it's like, I'd like to kiss you. Would you like to be kissed? And most people, it was a breath of fresh air. And a few people say, no, I want you to know when. And I'm like, no, this is danger zone. That's when men do shit that they shouldn't do, because they say, I knew that she wanted it. She just, you know, it's like, no, if you don't have a yes, I'm going to interpret it as a no. I'm not going to like make your choice for you. Now how do you react here? Huh?
It's a tough one. And I would say that both can be true. Like, to me, I appreciate what you're saying, especially if, you know, you're a person where you're still learning how to read energetic, intuitive cues. I understand post-Me Too movement. There's a lot of men who have a lot of awareness around not wanting to cross boundaries because they don't want to be that guy. You know, they don't want to misread a situation, and I understand that. And you know, I feel like I've had the experience where men have expressed, you know, hey, I have a desire to kiss you, and it's felt really good and sexy. And then there are some times where it feels choppy, and it kind of can make the moment complicated. And I also believe that there are some times where there's a way to be able to feel where I do give energetic permission. And I know that that's not the, you know, easy answer, but it's the true answer, that it's not always black or white for me.
Well, it's a dance, and it's so interesting with the Me Too movement and stuff that it's a challenge you don't want to infringe. And so a lot of masculinity's been neutered, and both parties are kind of paying a price around that, you know, because guys have, in a lot of ways, have lost their growl, you know, like that, I'm going to take you. I teach this tantric hug that's just, and a woman will melt in your arms, and I teach it to men of integrity. So.
Well, it's funny, you know, I was having a conversation with a lover of mine a few weeks ago, and I was telling him about how, you know, in the past, I've actually had a bit of self-consciousness because I have a very strong masculine energy. I do have feminine energy as well, but I also have a very strong masculine energy. And I was sharing with him, I was like, you know, sometimes I've felt self-conscious because I'm afraid that my masculine energy is going to scare men, or it's going to intimidate men. And he's like, well, you know, I feel very grounded and confident in my masculine energy. And when I felt that strong masculine energy in you, it actually has me feel way more safe to lean in and bring my beast, because I know that you can take care of yourself and that I'm not going to break you. And to me, this is and this is not, I'm clarifying here, this is not me giving men tacit permission to just be completely uncalibrated, to just go for whatever you want with women without asking. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that I feel that a growth edge in women's evolution is healing and cultivating a stronger relationship with our internal masculine. Because what I see often happening, and what I know I was guilty of, is that I did not have a healthy relationship with my inner protector. So when I got into sexual and intimate experiences with men, not having a healthy, grounded masculine, it was way easier for me to paint a story of feeling taken advantage of, feeling violated, feeling like something was taken from me, because there was something in me that was wanting the man to be responsible for both of our safety, as opposed to me playing an active role in being connected to my body and just trusting myself to say no.
And this, I'm going to tie it, because there was three things we were talking about: communication, intimacy, and sex. And I'm going to give you my definition of what runs a show. There are hundreds or thousands of things that influence relationships. And after doing this for 25 years or more, I've narrowed it down to something I call the ROS, your relationship operating system. And it's made up of your habits, patterns, and beliefs. And that's what's running the show. Those are all invisible and unconscious. And it's like the awakening is when you start to take control over those again and become aware of them. So this is leading up to one of my beliefs. And I have all the whatever validation I want for my beliefs, but it's still a belief. There's one main reason to be in a relationship. It is to get your needs met. The more aware we are of what our needs are, the more likely we are to get them met, and the easier it is to know when they're not getting met. And so it's like figuring out in the bedroom, and I consider intimacy, when I'm talking about that, intimacy is three shades: physical, emotional, and sexual. And I break them out because most people like kind of say intimacy equals sex. No, not. It's like finer and finer distinctions.
Yep.
So being able to even identify that we have needs, because I've had people go through the course and this one guy said, yeah, I had two needs, food and sex. And it's like all of a sudden this rainbow opened up. It's like, oh, I have all these other needs. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So, and I'll hand it back to you in a second. The masculine have been taught to not talk about their needs. Like I've had a guy that's an ex-military guy. He says, I would rather jump out of an airplane at night into enemy territory with people that want to kill me than sit down on the couch with my girlfriend and you and talk about my feelings and needs.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, we often have categorized that area as a weakness, and all the beautiful work of Brene Brown and a lot of other people, but vulnerability is one of the most courageous things we can do.
Yeah.
So, and women were taught to suppress their needs and not be needy.
Well, it's a really challenging one right now, postmodern feminist movement. And this is one that, has been definitely a growth process for me, and is something that I experience with a lot of the women that I work with, is that we have so much experience, not just in our own lifetime, but the energetic blueprints and the epigenetics of being owned by men, of needing men, of not being able to have our own financial resources, that when we finally receive the legal political rights to have our own resources and create a life for ourselves. And there's so much memory of, if I receive from a man, it means that I'm his property in some way. If I receive from a man, it means that I have less power. So often what I see happening is that we, as women who are, conscious, empowered women, on one level, there's this very strong, like, no, I don't want to need from a man, because in the past, the needing from the man has been at the expense of my own freedom and autonomy and safety. They feel like they have rights to me in some way. And simultaneously, there's this deep longing to be able to receive from men and be in our softness and our femininity and our receptivity and still feel that is powerful.
Yeah, and actually, see, I've coached couples in all different configurations,
Mm,
straight, gay, lesbian, and it's interesting. Part of that pattern is the masculine and feminine, and part of it is just the pattern of relationships. I was
mm,
coaching this one woman who was a high-powered executive. She got shit done at the office and got home, and with her girlfriend, she just shut down and became like this little girl again and couldn't speak for her needs, couldn't stand up, couldn't, because it's like this old programming about what it means to be in a relationship and how she showed up. At work, she showed up major powerhouse, got shit done. At home, she kind of collapsed. And I have this model of when we get triggered, where do we go? There's three places. We go collapsed, combative, or we get courageous and stay in our heart. And I noticed for me, because it was so dangerous growing up in my household, emotionally and sometimes physically, that I learned for me that the safest thing I could do was collapse, because the sooner I collapsed, the sooner the beating stopped.
mm.
And so that pattern, we get patterned, in there.
Yep. Yeah. It's I mean, it sounds similar to, the fight, flight, or freeze response. And then
Totally.
another one that, I've only recently come into awareness of over the past couple of years is the fawn response.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, in many ways, that can be the most insidious one. So I would describe the fawn response as, I'm going to become who I believe this person wants or needs me to become in order to create the feeling of safety and security in this relationship and in my body. And to me, that's what I see a lot of people wanting to untangle from right now. It's like in the beginning of relationship, when we meet this person, there can be all these ways that will subtly shift or become someone different to become who we believe this person wants and needs us to be. And there's
Right.
all these little ways that we compromise our truths. And what I see a big part of the spirit, the conscious evolution movement going on now is really about learning how to be in our autonomy and being in our sovereignty while still being able to have deeply meaningful connection where we make ourselves vulnerable in some very intimate ways.
Well, there's some interesting things, and I just want to reach out again to the people on Facebook land. If you're getting an aha from anything that Arielle says or that I say, if you could type it in, and we'll see most of your comments here, and then because this is going out on multiple places, we're going to miss some of your comments too. But it's great to do that, to see that. One of the things that I noticed for me, and I'm getting better at it, but I could either be internal or external. If there was something dangerous going on in my environment, or I perceived as dangerous, angry behavior, something like that, all my senses went external.
Mm.
And if somebody asked me, how do you feel right now? I'd say, feeling is a luxury. Like if somebody's trying to kill you, you don't care how you feel, you're in survival.
Yeah.
And what would happen with my ex, if we would get in, and this is several exes ago, we would get in a fight, and then like I was protecting myself, and I would end up leaving or doing something, and she would be, the fight's over, and an hour later she's happy and things are fine, and 2 hours later it's like I finally feel safe enough to feel my feelings, and all of a sudden the upset that was triggered 2 hours ago is showing up. And until I saw the pattern, I was surprised. I'm like, why am I pissed 2 hours later? Because it's the first time I can actually feel safe enough to feel my feelings.
Yeah.
And the masculine mind is, and I think we even talked about it a little bit, is wired differently than the female mind, that their one side of the brain has words, the other side is feelings, and the feminine brain has like a superhighway. So, multitasking, feel, talk at the same time. And guys are sort of like, I'm having a feeling, I'll talk in a minute. There's just this little one wire that goes across, and it goes very slow. And so I can either be having feelings or I can be talking.
Mm-hmm.
And here's one last important tip, and I'll hand it to you. For the feminine, if you're coming to the masculine in pain or upset, let them know what you want from them, because he can either defend himself from you or he can be there for you. Mm. And if he perceives it as an attack, he's going to defend himself, and it's not going to feel good to either of you. If he perceives it that he's your hero, you're coming to him because you want love and support, then there's a chance he can be open to you. So back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel that. I feel that the sensitivity of men, and just acknowledging how many defenses we as women have, built up within us to protect ourselves from the masculine. I mean, I know for myself, I had this awareness with a lover several years ago that I had spent so much of my life allowing for external opinions, especially those of men, to bypass my own feelings, that I had cultivated these external walls. Like, no, your perspective does not get to penetrate me. You know that it's like I had cultivated this intense defense mechanism to protect myself, but I'd become so guarded that I wound up causing wreckage in my relationships with men because I didn't trust them. And I really got to see my own belief systems of, seeing the men as the enemy in some way or not trustworthy, and how I could build up walls that would actually cause harm because of that belief system.
Yeah, and what you nailed it. Like, there's people need to understand the distinction between boundaries and walls. And if you don't feel like your boundaries are going to be honored, then you build a wall. And when it comes to relationships and trust, there are two different really shades of trust. One is, do I trust you? Will you respect my boundaries, try to meet my needs, honor your word? Will you have my back? That's the level of trust most of us talk about. And the one you were just talking about is, do I trust me in a relationship with you? Will I keep my boundaries? Will I keep my word to myself? Will I respect myself? Will I have my back? Or will I give it up to be in a relationship with you? And there's so many times in my life I've given up on me to be in a relationship with somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I feel like that question of, do I trust myself? Am I in devotion to the truth that I feel within my heart, regardless of what relationship I'm in? Mm-hmm. It's a question that we need to be asking, because what I know for myself and what I've seen with clients that I work with is, when I am not trusting myself, and when I feel like it's not safe for me to listen to myself, it's way easier to point the finger outside of me and villainize another person, really, for not being able to read my own mind or do what I needed to do. So there's some deep personal ownership that I feel like is being called for, so that we can explore these rich and infinite planes of intimacy and sexuality together. Like, a teacher of mine would say, there's no such thing as a safe space. There's courageous space.
And what we confuse is safety and comfort. And the thing that you've talked about and I've talked about, and I wanted to bring up here, is that we both had probably a plethora of mentors and teachers. And what's really sad for me is that it took me so long to around the world of sensuality and sexuality to just say, you know what? I deserve to have a teacher. It's not like I'm, you know, Olympian athletes, the best in the world, they have coaches. Why didn't I think that I could have a coach, someone who could teach me an area that I didn't know myself? And I thought, I'm a manly man. I mean, I spent 18 years in Alaska, commercial fisherman. I was tough, rough and tumble, and I was going to figure this shit out myself. And you know what? All I did was waste probably 20 years where I could have found a mentor and gotten some coaching and transformed it. And part of the reason I wanted to do this call today, because you had mentioned that you've got an upcoming event. And in a minute, for people who are excited and want to have more of this in your life, Arielle's doing an event I want to hear from, and I'm a relationship coach, and I work with couples all the time, all around the world on Zoom on issues like this. So stay tuned. We won't leave you hanging. And one other quick thing, because we had talked about communication, and I want to just touch on something. There's a distinction I have about communication. We're either communicating from our head, our heart, or our hurt. And when we're in our head, it's all about the facts. Like, give me the facts, right, wrong, good, bad, who did it, solve the problem. And we get rewarded for being right and punished for being wrong. So vulnerability, when we're coming from our head, vulnerability is weakness. When we're coming from our heart, it's all about feelings, needs, emotions, connection. Vulnerability is key. And when we're coming from our hurt, which is the reptile brain, you talked about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, that's our options. And we're worried, like, who's the enemy? Who's the ally? Do I have to protect myself from you? And it's amazing how often we treat our partners as the enemy because we start to protect ourselves and shut down. I'm not going to tell her that. I'm not going to be vulnerable. When you don't want to be vulnerable, you shifted into that brain part. So it's like noticing when you're in your head, when you're in your heart, and when you're in your hurt.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a really, I work with people a lot around being able to have really uncomfortable conversations that have to do with speaking truth, that have to do with speaking desires. Because let's face it, most of us grew up at some point in our life feeling like we needed to change an aspect of who we were in order to create love, safety, and belonging, whether it's in our family life, whether it's in our relational life. And when we go into the nitty-gritty of speaking uncomfortable truths, often, you know, if our end goal is, well, I want this person to respond in a certain way, that's not very good incentive to be authentic, because there's a part of us that has an agenda about what the outcome is. So the way that I operate, the way that I've lived my life, and the way that I find people are attracted to working with me is that, to me, speaking truth is about, one, staying in integrity with myself so that I am trustworthy to me, and I am trustworthy to the people around me. That more than trying to preserve any relationship, the most important thing that I can do is be in integrity with my heart and show up in that integrity in all of my relations, because that's what I want from people, and that's how I am, like, a most worthwhile human, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's an interesting dance, because I'm going to ask everybody out there who wants more intimacy in your life, raise your hand. We can see you through we're watching. Raise your hand. Yeah. Okay. Most people don't. Like, it's intimacy sounds sexy, and it's really, you already tapped into it. It's about risk. It's if I'm being intimate and talking about my truth, what's alive for me, I don't know how you're going to behave. I don't know how you're going to react. You might go, that's crazy, or you're being too vulnerable, or you're being, if it's something in the bedroom, no, that's too much. You're kinky or you're not kinky or whatever, you know. And so it's like intimacy is about risk and connection and love is about courage.
And to me, it's about freedom. Like, it is really uncomfortable to practice intimacy, but ultimately, I find eventually we get around to it because we've gotten to a place where we're tired and just like drained from hiding so much of who we are and shutting down all these desires and these core aspects of who we are. So to me, intimacy, being willing to speak truth, is about my devotion to freedom in my life and really wanting to live a life where I get to be all of me. And hopefully I'm surrounded by people who love that version of me.
So I'm going to ask a leading question that we haven't talked, well, we talked, I think, a little bit about, but how much when you're dealing with clients is their life guided by what they're trying to avoid versus what they're trying to have? Like avoid shame, blame, guilt, embarrassment, you know, all.
I mean, it's a great question. What I'll say is most people lead their life in avoidance of being in relationship with their desire and their power. Most people, what I find when I first start working with someone, it's looking at, okay, you're saying you want this thing. Maybe it's, you know, a more fulfilling career. Maybe it's a deeper relationship. What is it within you that actually fears the power and the freedom and the infinite fulfillment of having that thing in your life?
Yeah, and a second half of that question is what do you have to let go of to have that?
Mm-hmm.
See, because there's a lot of times people say, oh, I'm with somebody who's not committed. There's no such thing as a not committed person.
Mm.
Everybody's committed to something. You know, one of my exes, it's like her son was committed to video games for a long time. That was his commitment, you know, and you could say he's not focused, not attention. No, he was really focused and really intention, and it was on video games. It wasn't what we might have wanted him to be on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and he's not committed to me. He is committed to freedom. Or there's another part which is really interesting. If you're wanting a future, there's three main areas of skills. So when I look at, I'm heady. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm heady. I'm getting over it. I'm moving more into my heart. So I break down relationships into heart set, mindset, skill set. And in the skill set, there's three things your skills have to do. And you teach skills. Scott Katamas, our mutual friend, teach skills. John Gray, all of. But here's what the skills need to do. Three things: clear up the past, connect you and get present, and create possibilities for the future. And clearing up the past is, if we haven't healed the wounds of the past, we're not available to be present. Mm-hmm. When I broke my hand for a long time, if you touched it, there was a disproportional reaction. You could bring tears to my eyes with the lightest touch because I cracked the fourth metacarpal going over the handlebars of my mountain bike. And so if we don't, and I had a cast, and the thing is, the cast was really good, or a splint. The splint was good for protecting me for a couple of months. But if a couple of years later I still had the splint on, my muscles would atrophy. And a lot of people got their heart broken in a relationship and they've kept the splint on and their heart is atrophying. So I've said a lot. Go for it.
Well, the other piece that I want to add in there here is, you know, how you're describing how we can kind of still be wearing our wound body, you know, but within the need to release the past. Often this isn't something that we can do alone. Often the way that we release these old belief systems and these old reaction patterns in intimacy is through creating new patterns and new neural pathways with people. And what I found, and I know this is something that I struggled with, is because I was used to having the experience of having people in my life who made me feel bad about my feelings or would react at me when I was vulnerable, I would start to assume that that's how people are supposed to react. And if I'm being vulnerable or too sensitive, there's something wrong with me. So often we'll attract people or choose people who make us feel similarly like there's something wrong with our vulnerability and sensitivity. So one of the things that I want to invite as we're choosing people to heal and to grow and to evolve with is to choose people and trust that you have a right to be with a person who creates a loving space for your vulnerability. And this doesn't mean that this person is going to be perfect. But for me, I know a criteria when I'm dating someone is that I want to feel that they welcome my vulnerability and that they're doing their work to look at their reaction and defense mechanisms and to replace it with more curiosity and presence. And that if you're having this conversation, if you're here with this conversation, is that you deserve that. And there are people out there who want to be in this growth and healing process with you.
Yeah. So let me ask, I just put your website up on the page, and can you tell me a little bit about the course that's coming up, and who is it for, who is it not for, what can they expect to get out of it?
Yeah, so this course is called Sovereignty, and it's an 8-week course specifically for women who are having a desire to more fully embody their truth, meaning being able to discern what feels true and what feels not true in their body so that they can show up more powerfully in their relationships, in their sexuality, and open up to receiving more of what we actually want in our lives. So this is for women who want to be able to relax and experience greater levels of intimacy and pleasure and connection and sex. It's for women who have a desire to uh, heal their past pains around men and actually be able to engage in relationship with men from a place of trust and sovereignty. It's for women who want to be able to lead more authentically in their lives.
So let me ask you, you've used the term several times, and it's one of these terms that can be bantered around a bit and never understood.
Mm-hmm.
What does sovereignty mean?
Well, I'll say what sovereignty means to me because I
Right.
actually feel like it's important for everyone to come up with their own definition. But for me, sovereignty means being able to recognize what truth feels like within my body so that I'm not ruled by the external opinions and validations outside of me, and that I have cultivated my own inner compass, which really allows me to choose the life that I want to live and what I choose to believe in.
Got it. Anything, who is this course not for? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do, and we'll wrap this up.
This course, I would say this course is not a beginner's level course. This is a course for women who have gotten to a place in their growth where they're aware of what it means to be operating within victim consciousness, and they've already been doing work around their own trauma, and they're at a place where they're ready to choose to move more into creator consciousness and take radical, beautiful responsibility for their lives so that you can cultivate more mastery around energetics and the way that we connect. So it's not for people who are at the beginning of their journey and still feel more triggered than inspired by what it is that we're talking about here right now.
So can they have a call with you if they've got questions or?
If you click on Sovereignty on my website, there'll be the link there, and you can also email me at support@ariellebrown.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have to really discern if this is an aligned fit for you.
Yeah, I guess the last question I have, and here's where I have envy or jealousy of women, and I'm just making up a story in my head here, but I'm guessing there's going to be somewhat of a sisterhood of taking care of each other. I've got some really good friends that are women that goddesses that run events, and it's like I'm envious of the sisterhood that shows up because I typically don't find that with men that much.
It's well, I'm happy to say that I know some men who are running some beautiful mutually empowered men's circles in the area. And yes, to me this is a type of sisterhood where it's a beautiful support system, and it's also a calling forward. It's a recognition of you as someone who has power to choose and to create, and simultaneously be held with a lot of compassion. So it's a beautiful group of women that are already in the container. And again, I'm happy to have a conversation to see if it's an aligned fit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to bounce over like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
This, I am dyslexic, ADD, grammarly impaired. That book took me about 6 months to write and 6 years to edit. And it was an act of love. And I'm super proud of it. And if people are interested in it, they can get a free copy at arguelesslovemore.net/free book. If you want to spend about 15 minutes to a half an hour and get clear where you are in your relationship right now, where you want to go, and what are the roadblocks, I take people through a survey, and then we spend some time together. And people have said that short period of time was better than years of the therapy, because it's like, it's laid out. It becomes incredibly clear. And so if you're curious about that, you can get a hold of me at the arguelesslovemore.net or private message either one of us on Facebook. Thank you, Arielle, for joining us. Thank you, everybody. We'd love to see all your comments. What did you get from our call? Even if you're watching the replay, we'd love to see that. So any closing words?
Just a lot of gratitude to be in the dance and this evolving conversation that we're in.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.